Hola mi gente, welcome to the Money Chisme podcast, where we spill the real chisme on building wealth without the bullshit. Whether you're trying to invest, grow that side hustle, finally get your money right, or my favorite, buy rental properties, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Violeta, a first-gen Mexican immigrant, real estate investor, entrepreneur, and your financial hype woman. Get ready for tips, tricks, and expert advice straight from nuestra comunidad, porque el dinero es power and we're here to claim it. Don't forget, you can always find helpful resources down in the show notes and in descriptions, so make sure you check that out. Hola, welcome to another episode, and I am sharing some great news this week. Is that I finally closed on the construction loan for my house. I am building a manufactured home on 10 acres of land, and let me tell you, it has been a journey. I started this journey in 2022, and now we have the loan, and so now we're just going to get started. They're going to get started in actually building the manufactured home and doing all the land, development to get the house ready to move in. And so I'm going to share with you the journey, but also share the numbers and what you can expect, things I've learned, and all that chisme. So that way, if you ever want to do something similar, you kind of get an idea. I am going to share the numbers, but it can vary depending where you're at and what type of loan and all that stuff. So I'm going to talk all about that in this episode. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. And this was, I think I was starting to think about doing something like this around 2020, 2021. After COVID, I think a lot of us had kind of like this mindset shift of like, hey, what are we really doing with living and working in this capitalistic, country that we are like working ourselves to death. And COVID, I think, opened a lot of eyes to a lot of us. And it was the same thing with me. I was in the military. I'm still in the military, but like I'm about to get out in a few months. But I started thinking about leaving the military, especially since I was thinking of having my daughter. And it just was like a lot of like, okay, I really need to think, what am I going to do now? And I talked to my husband and we talked about it, and we're like, okay, I think we're going to make the decision to leave the military. It's time. We've been in for quite some time, and neither one of us had thought to like stay in the whole time. And then it's like, well, now or never, because then we're going to end up just being here for 20 years and then we're going to miss out on a lot of stuff. So that was around that time, end of 2021, beginning of 2022, when we made the decision of leaving the military. Now, this decision was a little bit difficult because the military is a stable paycheck. You get money on the 1st and 15th of every month consistently. You know exactly what you're going to get, right? And like, it was pretty crazy to think, okay, we're going to go out. And again, we've been in for quite some time. He got out at 13 years. I'm getting out at 14 and a half. So 14 years, over 10 years of getting consistent, steady paycheck, not having to really think too much about, finding a job or anything like that. So, but at this time is when I had started my taking real estate investing seriously. And so I was like, you know what? By the time we decided to get out, because the goal was around this time, I wanted to give myself a few years to be able to get some houses, some more rental properties. And so that was the plan, right? That I was really going to go hard at real estate investing because I still had to finish out my contract. So the reason I had to wait a few more years versus just getting out right then and there was because I had an obligation, because the Navy paid for my school, for my degree, and I owed I think it was 6 years because of that. And my husband just had to wait till the end of his contract, which was a few years as well. And so we were going to be getting out. Well, we are getting out at the same time. He's already out. And so that's why I was like, okay, in those few years, I'm going to be able to acquire enough rental properties and that. And so that was the goal. And so then the next thing was deciding where we were going to live. He's from Florida, I'm from Texas. Now, loved San Diego, and I would definitely have stayed in San Diego had I been able to convince my parents to move over here, but they weren't having it because down in Texas, my mom is from Matamoros and my dad's from Monterrey. I'm from Monterrey as well. And it's easy. It's right there for them to just take the bus or whatever to cross the border and go visit family, right? And over here in San Diego, they'd have to catch a flight and all that. So I understand. And so, but I wanted to be close to my family because I had been away from my family at this point for 14 years, and I only get to see them on holidays and a few times throughout the year when if they come to visit. So uh definitely decided that we're going to be by my parents because my daughter is the only granddaughter on my side, and on his side they have two grandchildren. So it's kind of like being even. And also, I wanted my daughter to be around, Spanish speaking, so that way she picks up Spanish and be close again to the border as well, so we could go visit. So it would just be easier. So then we decided, okay, well, where are we gonna stay? And I didn't want to go back to Dallas. I'm from Dallas, and no me gusta. Like, I don't know what it is. I think maybe just growing up on in it. Like, I'm like, all right, I'm over it. And every time I go over there, it's like construction all the time. So we decided San Antonio because it's kind of in the middle. I had already lived in Houston during the time that I was going to college to get the degree for the Navy, and I did like Houston, but I didn't want to be in Houston, and I didn't want to be in Austin because it was expensive, and I don't know anything really about Austin. San Antonio, I have been there several times, and I knew that it was the next big boom, right? San Antonio is going through a lot of growth and development, and I actually know a lot of military that are going to retire. It's attracting a lot of military veterans. So we decided in San Antonio. So once we decided that we were going to be in San Antonio, we were really debating, okay, like, where in San Antonio and all that. And at this time, around COVID, I feel like there was a big shift after COVID with a lot of like homesteading and things like that. And I fell down in that rabbit hole, and it appealed to me. Throughout those years, I was definitely, growing my own food, learning how to garden and all that stuff. I had chickens in my previous home, and I really enjoyed it. I really was enjoying that. I started, like, even with my mental health, it started improving, and it really helped me throughout the time that I was going through fertility treatments and all that stuff. And so I really wanted to, you know, start living a slower life, and my mindset started shifting of like work, 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 and really, chasing the next big promotion or the next big thing of being successful, right? So we really talked about it, and we're like, you know what? I think we want to go and buy some land and be able to build a house on it and grow our own food, homestead, and all that stuff. So we started the hunt. Now, this is where my first tip comes in is when you want to start looking for land. Definitely, I know we hate Facebook and everything like that, but for me, Facebook is really useful through the Facebook groups. I don't use Facebook for like posting or anything like that. I just have it there mostly because I'm like part of lots of groups, like obviously the neighborhood one, just to keep in the know, but I'm a part of a lot of real estate investor groups in the areas that I invest in. Of course, I had to join the one for San Antonio, and then I'm in a few other groups as well. So that's what I use it for. And if you're not using it for that, like, you're really missing out on some of these awesome resources. And that was one. I found a Facebook group that was geared toward like land sales and stuff, and of course I used a lot like the MLS, not MLS, but like Realtor and all that stuff, landforsale.com, stuff like that. So, um, but it was through the Facebook group that I saw, someone posting, several lots for sale. So then I started looking where it was and what it entailed. Now, I've never bought land, so it was definitely scary, especially doing this out of state. I was over here in California. There was no way I could go and look at this land. Y I know que me van a decir que estoy loca, that I'm crazy, because I actually bought this land without stepping foot on it prior. And I will say that this kind of, you know, because I invest in out of state properties, I have gained the confidence to be able to do that, right? Because I know how to um, find resources, a realtor, and all that stuff. So I contacted the realtor and all that stuff, went through that, and through a lot of like FaceTime and videos and all that stuff and researching and all that stuff, I decided to, like, okay, definitely interested. I looked around the area and everything is not too, it's on the outskirts of San Antonio, which is perfectly fine for me because I honestly don't go to the city that much. Even now in San Diego, like I don't really go down to San Diego, especially when I lived in the rural part in Ramona. It's kind of like a rural area, rural town. I stayed there for most of my time. I rarely went and, around in San Diego. I stay mostly at home. I'm a homebody, so living in the outskirts of the main city, when I want to go I can, but I know for like 70-80% of my time I'm going to be local and in my house. I love being at home in my yard, in my garden, enjoying my mortgage, as some people say on TikTok. So I ended up wanting this land because it had a lot of nopales that were full of tunas. It was covered with mesquite trees. I mean, I loved it. It was what I wanted. The only thing I kind of wish that it would have had was a few oak trees, because the neighbor had a few, and I was like, dang. But of course, that one isn't for sale. But you know what? I'll plant my own, I guess, and in like 20-30 years, I'll enjoy it, I guess. But this land cost 145,000 for 10 acres, and there was water. There was the water line and electric line was at the street. Now, this land was shaped like they call it a flag shape, where um, the land kind of, I mean, imagine a flag, right? The little stick is part of the road that meets at the main road, and then it goes all the way, and then the flag part is the actual plot, because there's another piece of land, another plot in front of yours. But in order to have access to the road, they create this little narrow path. And, a lot of people don't like that, but I wanted that because I had this vision of being able to drive down that and just plant trees on the sides and have like this beautiful like path. And it's going to take some time, right? Because trees take a while, but over time it's going to create this, pretty canopy. So that was my vision. And then the lot next to me was also available, and I ended up convincing my parents to get that one. So that way now we're, building kind of like a family compound on 20 acres combined. Now, here's the tricky part, because with land, you either have to buy it like outright. This one actually had owner financing, meaning the owner will act like the bank. You make payments to them for like, they still charge you like an interest. In this case, they were. I forget what the interest. I think it was gonna be like 10% or something like that. So, plus they wanted a high down payment. I forget what it was at this point, but it was going to be too crazy. But with land, you really can't get loans too much. It's very hard to find financing. There are land loans out there, which is what I ended up getting. but it's pretty tricky, and you kind of have to like it's annoying, right? But I did find a bank to which is local, and which is my next tip is to find the local banks that are in those rural areas because they deal with that more often than somebody a bank from the city or whatever. They're not going to really want to do it, but the ones that are in that area are used to it, so then you have an easier time. But with these loans, they are more most of the time interest only payments up front, and that's how mine was. And the interest was fixed, but it was only fixed for a certain amount of time. So with these loans, they had like increments. The first one was going to be at the 7 year mark, where they would reassess and then switch the interest rate. So you would want to pay off this loan before then. Now, there are different ways to buy the land and also build your house. So you just have to be aware of that. But because I wasn't going to build right away, I only had to purchase the land. So I needed to get a land loan. And so that's what I did. And then, in order to get the down payment for that, I actually ended up selling my Lexus. It was a 2017 Lexus, and I had it paid off already. So at this time, we had bought the little beater car that I was driving around before it finally crapped out on me. But my husband actually was using that because he has a truck, and his drive was an hour at this time to where he was stationed at. And so we had bought that beater car just for gas purposes. And I was like, you know what? We don't need three cars. I am perfectly fine just driving that beater car because at this time he was basically getting out. And I was like, all right, let's get rid of this car. And I used that for money as a down payment for the land because I didn't want to use like our savings or the rental income that I was getting at that time because actually that was going towards like fertility treatments. So yeah, I ended up just selling the Lexus, and that's how I got the money. And so August 2022, I ended up, closing on the land. And then I went down there a few months later, I think in November. I went down there after I had bought the land and actually set foot on it for the first time. And I was so happy. I was so glad that I bought it because, like, wow, I'm excited to get on there and start homesteading and building my house. And so, even though I had a few more years before my contract was up, it was time to kind of like start looking at what I wanted to build on it. But around this time was the time that I was going through my fertility treatments and surgeries, and we ended up having to do a surrogacy journey. So we had to kind of shift a little bit in for as far as our finances and what we needed to focus on. So we really had to like raise funds and all that stuff to be able to do the surrogacy journey. So 2023 was just, focus on that. And then my daughter was born in 2024. So then we could start focusing as, we were getting closer. 2025 was the year that I was getting out. My husband was getting out at the end of 2024. And so around end of 2023 and early 2024, I started kind of researching on what kind of house I would want to build on this land. And I knew that having a stick built, which means just building a regular house the regular way, was going to be very pricey. And so I wanted to look at alternates. And during this time, of course, I was still going, kind of like really deep into YouTube videos and all that on people homesteading. And I started seeing a lot about barndominiums. And I started researching what a barndominium was and all this stuff and the whole flexibility that it provided. And I decided that, you know what, I want to build a barndominium. It's they were saying it was cheaper than a stick built, and you have such a leeway with the layout, because with stick built homes you have to worry about, load bearing walls, things that make sure that, the roof doesn't cave in or whatever. But with barndominium, I guess the weight is distributed on the outer walls, so then the inner walls are just like you could do whatever layout that you want. So I really like that, and I started thinking that, hey, I want a barndominium. Well, I, was just watching YouTube videos, but I didn't really dive into what the cost was actually, because, like I said, at this time I was more focused on the surrogacy journey that we were in. And then at the end of 2024, it was like, all right, we need to start figuring out what we're going to do and actually build. And so then I started getting quotes for a barnuminium, and wow, let me tell you, it is still pricey. So, just to give you an idea, was that the way a barnuminium, the quote happens is they'll sell you the kit, which is basically the walls and like the roof and all this stuff. And usually it will include them setting up. And this is called like the shell, right? It's all the outer parts, because our barnuminium is basically a metal building. And so they, prefabricate it, and cut out everything and send you all like the pieces, like a freaking, Lego set. And so you can either buy the kit, and then, a lot of people that know how to build and stuff like that, they'll do that. And which is what I was watching on YouTube, not thinking like, hey, I'm not a construction worker or, general contractor or anything like that. And so that was my bad. And so you could do that, get the kit and do everything yourself, be your own general contractor and all that. Or they could, rise the whole shell, weld it together for you, put the foundation, all that stuff. And then after that, it's like phases. And with this builder, it was that they would have like three phases, and even with the third phase, now they did do turnkey, but I definitely wasn't interested in doing turnkey, because that's basically a stick built at that point. And they would do everything, including installation, but they would not do the like plumbing, electrical, or anything like that. They would just kind of like do the rough framing on the inside of the layout, and then that's it. And they would put foam, insulation foam, and just that was already like 189,000 just for that. And it didn't include like the clearing, it didn't include, like I said, the electrical, the plumbing, drywall, all this stuff. So it would end up, costing way more. Now, I've been spoiled with the mentality because of the military, having a steady paycheck and whatever. I've never had trouble getting a loan, and we had the loan over here for the California house, and that was like our mortgage there was like $4,000. And so I'm thinking, okay, over here it's gonna be fine. Okay, yeah, it's gonna be pricey. And when I did the rough calculations, because you could use like those calculators online just to get an estimate of, and they're pretty accurate, a lot of them, especially I think it's calculator.net or something like that. They have a mortgage calculator right there. So I calculated, and it would be roughly around the same, like 37, 4,000, whatever was going to be our mortgage. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we could do that, right? And the problem was that when I went to go get the loan, we started having issues because my husband was a contractor. So he had gone out and gotten a contractor job at a startup company, and meaning he's a 1099, so basically self employed. And so if you're self employed, this one's for you. If you're thinking about buying a house, is that when you are a 1099 self-employed, the banks will give you such a hard time with getting a loan because you don't have a stable income, and they want you to have maybe depending on the lender, at least 2 years of consistent income as being self-employed. So you'll have to file taxes and all that stuff. And you also want to make sure that during this time, if you know you're going to buy a house in the future, if that's your goal, that you are not, doing too many deductions, because then that's going to lower what, how much you make, right? Because maybe you brought in, let's say, 100,000 in revenue, right, of income, but because you start deducting this or that or whatever, then you actually are making like 80,000 at the end of the day when you file your taxes. So when you go get this loan, they're going to say you're making 80K instead of 100,000, and now you're going to either have trouble getting the loan, or you're going to have trouble getting enough of what you need to actually get the house that you want. So make sure that you're being strategic about what you're deducting and all that stuff. And so talk to your tax person, and also maybe a lender. That way you know what to kind of like start preparing for. And so, because my husband was a 1099, uh, when I went to go apply for the loan, they weren't going to include his income, and they weren't going to include the military income, because now he left the military, right? So that became such a hassle. Oh my God, that was the beginning of like the stress. So because he was a 1099, like I said, they didn't want to include his income, but they sure as hell included his debt, which was, paying child support, and also he still owed money on the truck. So he had a car payment. And so he's not making, so all of that debt, then carries over to me. And I have my rental properties, right? So then that made my debt to income ratio way too high. So they were only going to let me borrow maybe 200K, 250, and I needed like 400K. Actually, it probably was going to be closer to at least half a million, 500K, because the thing was that I wanted to lump the land loan together. So there's a way to, like, merge everything when you get your construction loan or whatever. They pay off the land, and then at the end, once everything's finalized, then you just end up with one mortgage, right? So I needed to have enough to pay off the loan, but also enough to build the house. Now, at first, we weren't kind of stressing too much. I mean, we were, right? Because, like, wow, big sticker shock. But, and then, the whole loan thing. But my husband, it's a startup company. They were planning and were in the process of turning it from a startup to an actual company. So then he would become a W-2, like a regular employee, and that had a regular paycheck and all that stuff. And then they would accept that, right? They just needed paycheck stubs. It was so ridiculous or whatever. But the problem was that we had to wait for that. And then it just kept, they kept pushing it back because it takes time to do this. And so the month would go by, another month would go by, and then now we're like stressing. And then they're like, well, we still aren't going to be able to qualify for what you need. So then I start looking at smaller builds and smaller barndominiums, but like it was just like, and then on top of that, because of the timeline, I was like, dude, like this is gonna take like a year to build, and like we're already so behind. So like I was going through it. Not to mention the salary that my husband was getting at the time was not going to be enough to like help cover that. And because I was planning on just going to school, I wanted to take a break from working after I get out, because it's like working nonstop and being like all the time. I wanted a break, right? Take advantage and take a break. And I was saving up for it. But I'm like, dude, like 4,000 is going to be tough. And like I don't know, like, so we decided like, all right, we got to figure something different out. And we started seeing like things about manufactured home. Eventually, once you start looking at these homesteading videos, you'll end up with people who build manufactured homes on the land. And so I started looking at them and started researching about them. I'm like, wow, that's actually not bad. And so we started looking at manufactured homes, and we realized that one, they get built faster, right? So I don't have to wait like a whole year. Now, mind you, because of our timing, we still have to wait until like end of August still. So, but whatever, it's still not another year. And like everything's so much more affordable for what you can get, that you just set it on the land and they're still sturdy and everything like that. It's just that manufactured homes get a bad rep, right? Because it was seen as like basically trailer trash and all that stuff. But let me tell you, like, once I started thinking about it and doing the numbers, I started like having this mindset shift of like, I wanted this big, huge house and all that stuff. But like in Ramona, I had a 4 bedroom, 2 story, 2,400 square foot house. And let me tell you how much wasted space that house. Like, I didn't use a lot of them, especially the rooms. One was like an office that I didn't even use because I would just, work downstairs, because 2 stories is a pain in the ass to go up and down and everything like that. To like, oh, you want water? Okay, now I gotta go downstairs, or anything like that. And then like there was like we had a second living room that just basically just had desks in it that I didn't use except like once in a while, that I wanted to force myself to use a desk. Like, it was a lot of wasted space. And so I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, and then it was a pain in the ass to clean, like going upstairs, downstairs. Like, it was a whole freaking like evolution. It was a whole process. Like, we all had to like, clean that freaking house, and it was a pain in the ass. And like, I started thinking about it, like, we really do not need that much space. Like, my stepson, if he lives with us, that's fine. We'll have enough rooms. We only have my daughter. It's just going to be the four of us. Like, we don't need much room, especially because most of the time we spent our time outside. And even when I would, do podcasts and stuff like that, I would go outside and do them and work outside because I love being outside in my backyard. And so I started thinking of like, okay, we don't need that much space, and we don't need all this stuff. Like, I could still make this work, because I started seeing people like, um, updating their manufactured homes, making them look really nice and everything. Like, oh, I could do that, right? And so we decided to get a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, manufactured home. It's 1,700 square feet, which the layout, I love the layout and stuff. And like, there's gonna be no wasted space. Every space in that house is going to be utilized, it's gonna be used. And so I won't feel bad of paying a mortgage of and paying for wasted space like I did with the house in California. Like, I was paying $4,000 for me to use the bedroom, my bathroom, the living room, the kitchen, and outside. That's it. All the other rooms, like, were just not being used, and I was just paying for them. So I'm glad that we decided to shift gears and we decided to get this manufactured home. Okay, so let's get into the actual numbers of what it's going to cost for me to build this manufactured home on this land. And I'm not going to get too much into the loan process because I want to do a separate episode on that, because this episode's getting too long already. So, for the manufactured home itself, it's going to be 129,900. That's what it cost us for the 3 bedroom, 2 bath manufactured home. Again, it's 1,700 square feet. Now, in total improvements, meaning that everything that they're going to do from to make the house livable, like electric, a driveway, all that stuff, it is quoted at $36,000. So overall, the whole package deal is supposed to cost around 165,000. And I'm gonna go into the breakdown a little bit, but I do want to make a little note that when you go get a construction loan, usually they add about 10-15% on top of that. So let's say it's the quote is 165,000. They're going to add another maybe 10-15% as a buffer in case like prices go up or there's something that came up. You have that buffer. So then it will actually, they'll let you borrow a different amount, not because they're not going to give you a loan for the exactly 165, right? They're going to give a little bit extra cushion for that. So they're going to want to do that. So when you go shopping around for a house to build, just keep that in mind, because if you have a max of, loan that they're going to let you borrow, you have to take that into account, that percentage. But again, I want to go into that in another episode because there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about with that. Now, for the breakdown, again, our land is raw land, right? It used to be a ranch, and the ranch got sold, and everything just has overgrown. But there is water and electric at the end of the road. Now, remember, my land is shaped like a flag, so that means they have to pull the electric and the water line all the way back to where I'm going to build. So just be aware that adds extra cost. I was okay with it because on top of that, I have to build a drive, a basically street all the way back there. But because my parents are getting the lot next to me, we're just gonna go halfsies on it. And then same thing with kind of the electric and stuff. They could just jump from mine. So as far as the fees, let's get into that. So again, the actual manufactured home is 129,900, and this is a complete manufactured home. It includes appliances minus washer and dryer, drywall. So instead of like how sometimes you see these manufactured homes have those like mobile panels looking things, it's actually going to be drywalled on in the inside, and it's going to have like the plumbing and electric run through the house and all that. So that includes everything. So it's basically already a ready to go house that you just need to put on some land. Now, as far as preparing where you're going to put the house, the site prep is going to cost me $1,200. And the home pad where the house is going to actually be, right? Site prep is like clearing debris and maybe like, trees or whatever. But the home pad itself, they have to like flatten it, level it out, and blah, blah, blah. That's going to be 2,900. And then the thing that gets a little bit pricey is the water connection, because again, I have the water at the end of the road and I have that long drive back to where I'm actually building. So they charge 1150 for the initial like setting up the line connections and all that stuff. And then for additional footage, they charge me like $3.90 per extra foot, it looks like. And it's an extra 12.30, so it ends up actually being pricey at 47.97. Yeah, pretty pricey. And then the same thing with electric. The initial is 1900, but then on top of that, they're going to charge me an extra 1500 because again, I have to pull the electric all the way back there. So things to keep in mind if you want to be like way back there and have to, you want to buy a lot similar like mine. Now, permits and fees from the electric company is going to be around 1250, and then to get the meter and a loop in the pole to put where the meter goes for that, I guess for the electric is going to be 2350. So yeah, again, like utilities are gets pretty pricey. Now they do have to do plumbing. There's plumbing throughout the house, but then of course they have to do the underground plumbing where they connect all the lines from the main water line and to the house. That is 1150. And then for the septic, I'm getting a septic. It's for a 3 bedroom home. It includes the installation, inspection, and the engineering plans, and things like that. It's $7,400, and it's an extra $1,500 to get the septic engineering and permits done. Now, they're going to build 2 decks, one 4x8 and one 6x6. And the 4x8 is $1,200, and then the 6x6 deck is $1,600. And so that brings the total to a little over $36,000. Now, one caveat though is that we didn't include the driveway building the street from the main street all the way back to where I'm having the house. And the reason for this is because, as I mentioned, my parents and I are going like halfsies on building a road back there. Back there, it's gonna be a gravel road, so I didn't want it included. One, because again, we're going halfsies on it, and two is to bring the loan a little bit lower, just because again we were having trouble with the financing portion. So I was like, you know what, we'll pay that and bring it down. So because we had actually also picked a different manufactured home that was going to be a little bit pricier, similar square feet, but for some reason it was pricier. So we went to this one, and on top of that are going to pay for the road out of pocket. So that is another, I think it was $11,000. So overall, give or take, you're almost at like $180,000 to actually, build the home and then get all, the utilities back there and prepare the land and all that stuff. So 180. Now remember, I have a land loan on the land, and I still owed 114, so they had to pay that off, and so that's why then I end up having a loan amount of 288. Now I know the math doesn't work out because in reality it's close to 295 of what the overall cost of, paying off the land loan. But because I had purchased the land for 145 back in 2022, the land value actually increased, and I had again, put a down payment on it. And so the land actually went up to like, you know, based on the tax value, if you want to go off of that, it's worth 180K based on the county, right? So I had equity in that house, so I was actually able to use the equity of the land to use as a down payment for the whole loan. And so that's why I actually end up with, $288,000 loan. Now I will say the interest rate is high. It's at 8.42, which brings my overall mortgage after like insurance and taxes to 2,700. But realistically, like I went from, wanting a four, well, not wanting, but was depending on the house that I wanted at that time, I was gonna end up with like close to $4,000 mortgage. Now I'm down to 2,700, and I can still go and get a VA home loan on it after everything's completed. Because the problem that I was having with doing a VA home loan off the bat with the construction is that they're so freaking nitpicky on things, on building, that it was just gonna like prolong everything, and it was just gonna complicate it. But now that the house is built and everything's lumped together, now I could go to the VA home loan and be like, hey, I want to refinance into a VA home loan, and that will bring down my interest rate. I don't know the interest rates off the bat on my head of what the current ones, but it's definitely going to be lower than that. So that's in the future, and then my mortgage will go lower. And now, like, things are looking better. Now I have a way cheaper, from what I initially thought I was going to have as a mortgage. And my rental properties I already make pretty much most of this mortgage. And then, so now I'm able to, start getting financial freedom even faster, because now I am still able to fulfill my goal of, not working for the rest of the year, because I'm just going to focus on school, because being a veteran, I do get benefits with school, and they give you, some extra money to pay, so that way you could, have somewhere to live, help you with those bills, so that way you could focus on school. And then I'm still going to do the reserve, so that's extra money. And then, other things that I'm bringing in, plus the rental properties, but that's getting put to the side because I want to keep reinvesting that. So and then my husband's making more now than when he first started at this job. So yeah, things are looking up. And it was a stressful process. And, like at some point I thought that it wasn't going to happen, but we are done. We signed it. Now it's just the waiting game of, having this house built. They say it's around August time frame. So not sure if I want to try to do a house hack, or maybe just get an RV and park it there until it's done. So I guess stay tuned and see what I end up doing. But thank you so much for listening, and make sure, please, if you can, just like and share, rate the podcast, this episode, because it helps grow the podcast. But other than that, I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.